What's going on, everybody? Anthony Frieda here. Welcome back to Badum Biz. All right, today on the show, we got a buddy of mine. His name is Ryan McCausland. Ryan is a professional drummer and percussionist, and his latest work was touring with Dear Evan Hansen, the musical, around the country. We talk a lot about his experience playing for musicals. The guy is a killer, very knowledgeable, and we had a great conversation this whole episode, and you're going to hear sprinkled throughout the episode little clips of Ryan playing some drums. Actually, a few of them are from his tour setup, so it sounds really good. So anyway, please enjoy the episode. What's going on, everybody? I got my buddy Ryan McCausland here. Ryan is a drummer and percussionist, pro drummer and percussionist, and he does a lot. He's mostly known for doing musicals, and the latest musical he was doing was Dear Evan Hansen, touring with that musical. So welcome, Ryan. Thanks for being on, man.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's good to see you again.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
We go back, so I'll just sprinkle in a little bit of that background stuff. Like, I met Ryan just like I met a lot of my other guests at Montclair State University doing music. And I think we played some pretty badass pieces of music together.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like we kind of went through the trenches. I always love that. I like that. Like, and people don't, people outside of the music world, especially if you're like dating, they don't necessarily understand, like, when you work so hard on a piece of music or whatever, and you're rehearsing together and like hours at a time, multiple times a week, and then you have that performance, and it's like such a adrenaline high. People don't understand the connection that you form with those people. So you're definitely one of those people, man. So how you been though, dude?
Pretty good. I think like most people, I've been sort of trying to make the best of what's kind of a really rough situation for most people in music. I think the biggest thing I was thinking about was really just taking some time to enjoy the time off, because there's just nothing. There's really no, especially for me in theater, there's not really much to do right now. And when you're used to sort of going through that grind of like, oh, I got to find a place to either, connect with or audit shows, or find a way to take, lessons with a certain person, or connect and just keep grinding over and over again. It doesn't really stop, because, the industry just doesn't stop. It sort of demands that sort of constant, that constant sort of effort. And since, the only benefit I could think of right now is the fact that since everything is sort of on pause, is just sort of take advantage of that opportunity to, just sort of, relax and not feel pressured to constantly be creating all the time.
Yeah. So it's, from what you're telling me, it sounds like your schedule was crazy.
Well, I mean, the touring schedule was pretty static, but it was heavy. We do 8 shows a week, just like the Broadway guys.
Wow.
So we're playing Tuesday to Sunday, 2 shows Saturday, 2 shows on Sunday, and only have a day off on Monday. Sometimes we will be traveling from different cities on Mondays, so it's like a pseudo day off. It's like you're not playing, but you're traveling. So it can be a bit of a grind, when you're just moving around constantly, especially if you're moving only week by week by week.
Yeah.
But yeah, the show itself, it's I don't want to say it's overly taxing, but it's a heavy rock show. So you're constantly waving your arms for about 3 hours every night. So it's it is a lot. It does get to be a lot after a while.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the only drawback for being on the road is that you don't have a sub, like the Broadway guys. If they come under the weather, or they don't, they're just not feeling it, or they just need a night off, they can call in one of any number of subs they have in the city, and then they can just take that night off. For us, it's a little bit different. If we want to schedule time off, it's got to be done usually a few weeks in advance. They like to have as much upfront as possible. So um, it just means that your downtime is a lot less. It's few and far between, I would say.
Yeah. I was going to say, I want to get into that topic of, sort of that subbing for, an already established show. But I do want to highlight something for listeners, because they've heard me bitch about being on wedding gigs and, you're playing for 3 hours, 3 nights a week, whatever, and you get tired, blah, blah, blah. And that's somewhat I can argue, man, like nothing compared to 8 shows a week. And I would say that the pressure is even higher because, when people are paying tickets to see a musical versus there's a fucking bride and a groom who just want music for the day, like you have a higher pressure, you have actors, there's so many moving parts to that show. You're saying it's a heavy sort of more of a rock gig. So you're playing drums, man. Like you're playing drums. You're not just tapping away like on a lot of like musicals that I guess would be prior to the modern age of musicals, right? Like you're playing more classically oriented stuff. No, this is like you're hitting those drums. So to do that 8 nights a week, and to not be able to like say, hey, can I get a rest? It has to be like, weeks in advance. What I'm trying to highlight to listeners is you're a fucking badass, is what I'm saying. So that's fucking awesome.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, dude. It's not easy what Ryan was doing on a tour basis. So, but on the note of how the musical and musical theater industry kind of works on a level, I only know it from the perspective of like the percussionist and the drummer. But I do remember talking with you a lot back in the day about this. First of all, you were so interested in this stuff, and we all knew it. All of our friends group knew that he's going to be doing this one day, probably because he loves it so much, And and I do remember talking to you, and you were saying, yeah, I just contacted the drummer or the percussionist of this show, and I maybe got to like meet him, take a lesson with him or whatever. And then eventually you kind of make a small little relationship and maybe become a sub for that person. So
yeah, it's the whole. I guess you could argue. I mean, any sort of career in music is predominantly about the relationships that you make. Particularly so in theater, especially. So there's no audition for Broadway musicians. It's not like you go in and play like you would for an orchestral gig. It's very much who you know, and then that person will. The chairholder would usually come up with a list of 5 to 7 to 10. There's not really a set amount of people that I know of, and they would bring them on as subs, and they'd rotate them in every now and then. But to sort of get into that world, it's all about making these connections and sort of finding ways to. I guess find a place for a best place for where you would fit, or where in terms of the style of music of the show, or in terms of how the original drummer plays versus how you play, because essentially your job as a sub is just to emulate exactly the drummer that comes before you. There's no real interpretation. You wouldn't really bring what your creative element to that part of the show. I mean, you're pretty much there just to be a placeholder, and play it exactly the same.
Yeah.
Which is I guess both a blessing and a curse. It sort of depends on how you look at it, because you could be an incredible drummer and be very creative, but totally wrong for a show because you're not necessarily emulating the person who came before you. It's an interesting gig for sure. I mean, I really like it. I've always loved being able to try and do my best to copycat whatever someone has done before me, which I'm really interested in.
So that for listeners right there, what Ryan's talking about is, it would be like if I was, if there was a touring group, and I'm just going to throw out a name of a band that most people know, but like, I don't know. If I was going to drum for like a couple shows of a tour for, let's name a band, man. Why am I'm spacing here?
Sure.
Dave Matthews, maybe.
Sure. There we go.
That's actually a great example, because Carter
Mm.
Beauford, right? The drummer is pretty unique.
Mm.
And so I would be expected to literally like emulate that guy for the tour, because that's what the fans are used to hearing. That's what the band's used to hearing on stage.
Mhm.
That's quite the feat. You know what I mean? That's like easy to fucking do. So I have a lot of respect for that hungry energy of the sub. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You got to nail those parts and make it sound. You almost got to be like, you almost kind of the whole pit and the whole cast shouldn't know that there's somebody else on drum.
Exactly. That's pretty much spot on. You know, the mark of an incredible sub is having people have no idea you're there. You know, you're like a shadow. You come in, it's like they can't tell the difference between you and the original guy.
Yep.
And when you get to that place where it's indistinguishable between you and the original, that's when you start getting called back, and then you start moving up the list. So you're going to start being called first or second for the gig, and then you'll go in there, over and over and over again, which is sort of how you it's how you can sort of find your way into maybe even taking over a show. Like if the original drummer decides he's going to leave. I mean, a good example of that would be our show on Broadway right now is Jay Goldbus, but the original drummer was Jamie Eblin. And Jay Goldbus was the first call on that show. He was the one that sounded as close to the sound that they were looking for from Jamie. And so, when it came time to find a drummer to take it over after Jamie left, obviously Jake was the first person they went to. So, it's really, really important, especially in the Broadway community, to be as close to emulating the original drummer as you possibly can.
So for you, like, how many times have you, had this opportunity and sort of like proven yourself on those types of gigs? Like, have you had a number of those?
Not really. I mean, Evan Hansen was sort of the first time that I had the opportunity to really hone in on a particular drummer and the sound that he was at the theater level. I mean, going in to watch Jamie play and then listen to him on the recording, and even watching Jake play when Jake was subbing, it was really the first time that I had the opportunity to say, okay, here's exactly what they're looking for, so that when we went out on tour, I could make it as close as possible to what was going on in New York.
So that's a little different now. Being on a tour, you're not the original production, right? So this is taking something. Hey, can we replicate this something like the original production? Obviously, there would be a new cast of actors.
Right.
But as for music, can you play as close to that drummer, as like the original, right? And you're taking it around the country or whatever,
Well, and I think that the interesting thing about this show, and maybe shows like Hamilton as well, the cast albums are so they're becoming so iconic that people are listening to them nonstop. So what they come into the show, they're expecting to hear what they hear on the recording.
Oh, wow.
Which is a little bit different than what you would hear. Like you were saying, back like in the golden age of theater, there was tons more music than was recorded. The show could be even very different from what you would hear on the road. But for our show and for shows like Hamilton, it very much is, you're hearing the recording, and it's very, very similar to what you hear in the actual show. So, it's interesting. I remember when I was in school, a lot of times they would say, be careful of what you hear on the cast recordings, definitely use them as a guide, but don't fall too in love with those cast albums, because they can be very different from what you're actually playing in the live show. But as I got further and further into this new style of theater, it sort of closed the gap, I guess.
Okay.
If you could imagine, there was a lot more similarities.
Gotcha. So that's cool. So now, and also I kind of want to get into describing what you do, why it's different than the typical drummer job. It's pretty particular, if I would say, and tell me if you agree or disagree, but it does fall in line between being like a rock drummer or a pop drummer on the stage, right? and
Mhm.
providing that type of groove and pulse versus being a percussionist in the back of an orchestra. It's like you're straddling those two worlds a little bit, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So
Um,
go ahead. Like, what would be like your typical setup for like a Dear Evan Hansen show?
Sure. Well, every show is different. So, instrumentation wise, you can be called upon as a musical theater drummer to play any type of style, any type of instrument. Sometimes you're playing mallet instruments and timpani and Latin percussion, hand percussion. And then sometimes it's very straightforward in terms of our show. It's very straightforward. I play just a regular rock drum set with a djembe and some shakers and tambourines. And that's pretty much it. It's very, very straightforward. Um, the interesting parts about the show are a little bit more about how you play the drums. I mean, sometimes I'm playing drums with just my bare hands. I'm using a lot of different mallets and sticks to get like a more of a singer-songwriter kind of acoustic vibe from certain songs. And then other times I'm literally just hitting the drums as loud as I can.
Huh.
So it's really interesting how it's straightforward from the surface, but when you really dig into it, there are a ton of different interesting layers and things to keep. For me, I think it keeps things really interesting about this show.
What's some of the? That's super cool. I always love the idea that you're. Anytime I see a hand drum and some shakers next to the guy on drum set or the person on drum set, I kind of get a little excited.
Mm.
Like having one stick and a shaker in the other hand is awesome, or one stick in one hand and you're playing, a hand drum in the other. That to me
Mm.
is super interesting. But
Yeah,
you're thrown into that type of um what would you call it? You're as a pit percussionist or drummer, you are expected to do things like that.
yeah, you're very much a hybrid of a rock drummer and then a classical percussionist. You have to sort of, like you said, straddle that fence. Like where, a lot of guys go in and they study hardcore jazz, they study hardcore, um, like your recording artist drum set. Or you've got guys who are working in just classical percussion, um, and theater is sort of it's a perfect way where those two worlds really collide and really mix and match,
Yeah.
which is one of the things I love about it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you too. What could you describe one of the craziest setups for a show you've ever had?
Whew. Um, I in terms of some of my favorites, I mean, I loved the setup I had for the first show I played at Montclair, which is I was the percussionist rather than the drummer at that point. But
Okay.
the first show I played at Montclair was Sideshow, with Suleiman. He was the
Oh,
the drummer for the show.
our buddy
Um,
Taylor.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Listeners are going to hear that episode very soon, by the way. So thanks for referencing him. Yeah.
definitely. That was a lot of fun. The instrumentation was not too crazy. It was just a lot of stuff, and that's, I guess, maybe a hallmark of a lot of theater stuff, is that you're sort of called upon not only to um, I guess your role can also branch into that of like a Foley artist as well, where you were kind of responsible for sound effects and you're responsible for a lot of color and a lot of um, it's when you're a percussionist, it's a little bit different than when you're a drummer. And I've heard some guys say that they like percussion a little bit more because there's a little bit less responsibility on just keeping the time. And you get a little bit more opportunity to sort of explore that Foley artist space and create some really interesting sounds and things like that.
Have you done where you remember some of that percussion ensemble stuff we played, and your setup would have to be so particular based on the flow of what instrument you're playing from part to part in the piece. So I guess for a show, right, especially for a musical, it's a similar thing where, maybe the first act, you're mainly on, whether it's drum set and percussion or just percussion, you might be on maybe 4 different instruments. The second act, you're jumping between, like 2 instruments to a totally other set of instruments. And one example could be like mallet instruments such as xylophone and, bells to like timpani, right? And you could be in 8 measures. You could play all 3 of those instruments, right? Like, and you're jumping around. So, how often have you experienced that in any show that you've played?
It's actually very common. You're just jumping around from as many. It's almost like I think that some orchestrators are almost out to see just how many switches you can get a percussionist to make. In terms of trying. I remember we were playing a chorus line, also Montclair. That was Taylor Goodson on the drums. I was also on percussion at that one.
Shout out to Taylor.
We were there was a section where I had to be playing tambourine, and I was also glissing on the timpani at the same time. And it was just trying to figure out that choreography together so that you're not letting one go while you're concentrating on the other was just...
So what Ryan's talking about is a gliss on a timpani. It's when you hit the timpani and the timpani have pedals, and the pedal changes the tension of the drum, which basically changes the pitch. So if you push your heel back on the pedal, the pitch goes down. If you push your heel forward, the pitch goes up. So you were doing what I imagine is very specific gliss.
Right.
You were glissing up to a note, like you might have been on a G and glissing up to a C, right? So you're doing that in one hand, which is a total vertical movement. And then in the other hand, you're doing this horizontal movement of shaking the tambourine in time. You know what I mean? Like, it's so accurate. It would be like, if people are listening and you want an idea of what Ryan was doing, it would be like if you had to do 5 tasks in your day: feed the dog, cook this, drop off this, and blah, blah, blah. Imagine having to do that at a particular second, each one of those tasks. And that's what Ryan was doing. But everything seemed like it was happening at the same time.
Right. And honestly, it's funny, working on those percussion ensemble pieces that we did was so helpful. In trying to figure out how to make fast switches, and then being very particular about how things are set up, because a lot of times you're moving so fast and you have to strike things and get things in with so much precision that you're like on autopilot, because you have to be able to just sort of have your muscle memory do it and move on to the next thing so quickly. Which, when you do in theater over and over and over again, it really does build in, where, even if your brain is off in outer space, your muscles will take over and it will know this is where I'm supposed to go at this point in time, because I've done it so many times. But, training yourself, especially in college with all of those percussion ensemble pieces, was so helpful, because it really got you into that mindset of, all right, you just do it over and over and over and over again. So that it's so second nature that they're almost not even thinking about it anymore.
yeah, you create this accessibility to that skill. You know, it's a weird thing. It's a you and I have this weird understanding of that stuff
Mhm.
where it is a language. And I think about this lately, man, this has been going through my head. Think about the thing that you're an expert at, right? And we'll say drums and percussion. Let's just say you're an expert at it, meaning you know it on such a level, such a deep level, right? And imagine having that knowledge to another subject or skill. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Imagine having that same skill level and knowledge on business, you
Mhm.
know, or like, and I thought about like, fuck, like I am good at something on that level. And what would it take? Would it take the same amount of like grind and work
Mhm.
to get that same skill level on something else? And it's an interesting thing to think about. Like I've been talking a lot about percussion ensemble with the last couple guests,
Mhm.
and we were talking about like John Cage. We were talking about that type of stuff, and it's interesting. Like the level of playing we were performing at was pretty high, and we got ourselves to that point. It's not just a simple statement. Oh yeah, we played third construction.
Yeah.
It's no, like you performed a high level piece,
Mhm.
like with in a quartet. I mean, you did that piece too, right?
Yeah, yeah, that was I did that yeah, my last year
I
at
think I
school
saw
we
you
did that.
guys do that. That was good.
And that was so much fun, but again, it was the same sort of thing where you're just you um things are happening so fast and there are so many different, you're listening to like 1,001 polyrhythms out of nowhere. You're trying to pull one thing out of the thin air. It's just it's so difficult, and being able to do that over and over and over again, that repetition, so that you're not really thinking about it, but at the same time you're locked into what everything else is going on.
Yeah.
It's really, it's hard to describe, but it's one of those things that definitely, working on those pieces, working on them with such a high level of musicianship from everyone in the studio as well, because that really does help when you're
Oh
working
my God.
with people that are just at the top of their game.
Yeah.
It really is. It's, I mean, for me, it was invaluable to what I'm doing now, which may seem silly, when you're talking about, oh man, Dear Evan Hansen is such a departure from, John Cage or
Yeah.
Steve Reich, but there really is, there's so much that I took from those experiences and working in those ensemble pieces that I still use,
Yeah. Right.
working on something that seems a lot more straightforward.
Yeah. It sort of shaped your like I've said it before on this. I think I don't think I'd be the same level of musician if I didn't play that piece, just one piece, third construction.
Definitely.
You know, so it's wild, man. Now one other question I like kind of describing things to the audience. So
Sure.
can you describe now, especially since you're on a tour? Actually, these are questions for me too. Actually, very
Great.
curious about your setup. Right, is the
Mhm.
same pretty much every show, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So here's the question though: you're not performing always in the same space.
No, no.
So
Um,
how often do you have to like you get a new space and then have to configure some things?
well, so I can sort of answer that with the two different tours that I played so far.
Okay.
The first one was Dirty Dancing, and I was a percussionist on that show, so I was playing
Nice.
congas and bongos, like tambourines, all kinds of stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But um, that show was something called a non-equity tour, so it was non-union. We were not in town for very long, so a lot of times we would come in and we would set up, we would play the show, we'd tear it down, we'd get on a bus, and we'd go to the next city. So setting up and tearing down that show was almost a full-time job.
Wow.
Um, Luckily, I toured with some really awesome guys who had done this before. I toured with our drummer Kevin, and he had this whole touring thing on lock. So he came up and said, but here's what you're going to want to do. We're going to need to get you a carpet. We're going to spike that carpet with either a Sharpie or a bunch of tape. We can write everything down so that when they load it in, they can kind of get it in the right place. And then when
Oh
we come
yeah.
into sound check, you can just sort of tweak it and pull it into the right spot. So
Wow.
that, when we come in and do these things like, rapid fire, um,
Wow.
you're just you're ready to go. Contrasted with Dear Evan Hansen, we are an equity tour. So we're a whole union full production tour. So we're staying in places a lot longer. The shortest stint that we've ever had anywhere is only a week. And the longest, I think, was supposed to be Chicago, where we were supposed to sit there for like 3 months. But COVID took its toll, and
Fucking COVID.
But the longest sit that I've ever done was about 6 or 7 weeks, I think.
Wow.
In that case, though, for the there was less. Well, actually, so what I did for Evan Hansen was I sort of built the setup around exactly how Jamie had it in New York. I even went so far as to write down the tunings that I used on top of the head, so that whenever I changed heads, or if I were experimenting with different heads, I always had the same pitches, so that I wasn't freaking out the sound crew if they were dialing in something.
Wow. Okay, hold on. Can we stop right there? Can we highlight that? That's a hell of a lot of detail oriented stuff right there. So you're thinking about, and I like, by the way, that you're thinking about the sound crew, that they have sort of in this new space, even they have to maybe adjust some things, but there are templates, right? That I'm sure that you could, maybe I don't know what they're using, but they basically can kind of like, imagine it, I guess, listeners, like it would be like saving the settings on your TV or whatever the fuck. For the sound crew, for all of the mics, basically. So now Ryan is really forward thinking, and he's thinking about, okay, well, you know what? I got to change these heads. So on the drums, meaning the things that you hit. And so he's thinking, okay, I want to make sure every time I play, and you're saying you got this information from the drummer, from the original drummer?
So I actually got this idea from Sean McDaniel, who's just a giant Broadway drummer in New York City, and he has a whole tuning system that he went through with me while I was up in New York for 2 weeks working in the studio with the new cast before we went out to Denver to launch the show.
Sure.
And while I was there, Sean had explained to me his whole how he tunes his drums when he was at Frozen and Book of Mormon before that. And I've never heard drums sound as good as Sean's, so I was taken immediately with this. I was like, I want to incorporate this into what we do on tour. There's I'm sure that there's an article on Billy Miller's MillerMachine.com somewhere and on the internet where Sean breaks down and will tell you exactly how he tunes things for different setups, which is really interesting if you ever get the opportunity to check that out.
I would love to check that out. Absolutely. I think it's awesome what you were talking about, though, where you're basically coming up with a consistent tuning setting for your drums.
Right.
Because you're thinking about your sound going through that sound system. Mm-hmm. And then specifically the sound people that EQ each of one of those mics or whatever, whatever they put a compressor on it, whatever. If you're in a different tuning, right, and they set it to that tuning, they don't know that you're tuning it to C. They don't know
right.
that.
No, they're not sort of working. So basically, when we went into Denver, I wanted to make sure that whatever we had in Denver, as close as possible, I could keep as close as possible. I've switched out different cymbals. I've used different snare drums. I've experimented with different things, but I wanted to have some sort of anchor that kept me relatively in the same orbit as we were when we took it out in Denver, so that things weren't drastically different from city to city.
That's so smart, and it's not something I never have to do. I'm totally the opposite. I'm such a piece of shit that I just cool, they sound fine. I put the drums up. That sounds good to me. I'll deal with that.
Well, I think it's interesting because with a theater show, you're playing the same exact thing every single night. Which if you're playing on a different gig, you may play similar things every night, but you're not held to that very strange, like you're not expected to be a record. In in theater, a lot of times, like I said, they're expecting to hear what they hear on the record. So you are playing things so close to what you played from night to night to night,
Yeah.
that even little things will start to come through to you, to the other musicians on the band, to the sound team, to even the actors who might not notice things otherwise, just because they're used to hearing the same exact thing over and over and over again, and anything that deviates from that would pull their ear in a slight way, which is a really interesting and sometimes frustrating thing to deal with in theater.
Really?
But it's it's just part of it's part of doing something the same way over and over and over. I think my show tally was somewhere in the neighborhood of 650 something before we left.
Holy shit.
So yeah, so 650 times of playing that show
Holy
over and over
shit.
and over again.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my God. And how much of a time span was that?
I was about 17 months, I think.
Oh my God. Dude, that's crazy.
So it's just over and over and over again. And thankfully I love the music in the show, and I love the drum book, and it's been
Oh my God.
It's been orchestrated so well, and I play with some of the best musicians I've ever played with. So that definitely helps, But if you do something 600 times, eventually you're going to start to be like, oh man, I'm fried, Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say eventually, right?
Even if you love it to death, it's which I do.
Yeah. Wow, man. That's so hey man, that's impressive as shit, man. That like
thanks, man.
There are people, man. There are people that are, doing music for a living that are not doing more than 60 shows a year. You know what I mean? Performances a year. So what you're doing takes a lot a lot of effort and work, and man, I have a lot of respect for you.
Thanks, man. Truly. I really appreciate that.
Of course, man. Wow. I was going to ask you, so do you still, now during this COVID time, you've obviously haven't performed on that level of, have you done any performances at all? Have you done any playing at all?
Oh, I recently finished a record with one of the girls in our cast. She put it. She's dating our guitarist, and they put together this record, and we worked on it remotely. So I have somewhat like a studio setup here. It's sort of hard to see, but it's there's just sort of like a booth that I've sort of
nice,
built.
Man. You built that?
Here. So I bought some of it, and then I sort of built the rest around it so I could sort of finagle it into the room.
Wow.
So unfortunately, I'm living with my parents right now. So, and their houses are very, very close together to the neighbors. So I needed to find something more than just soundproofing the room. I needed to find some way to just get the sound down to a low enough volume that it wasn't going to bother anyone. But it was nice because it gave me an opportunity to sort of experiment with recording a little bit, something that I really hadn't been able to really delve too much into while I was on tour.
Yeah.
And we worked on this record remotely. It actually just released, I think. It's not yesterday, but maybe the day before that.
Let's plug it. Let's definitely plug it. What's the name of the artist?
Maria Weiris.
Okay, cool. You know what? I might link this stuff in, man.
Yeah, definitely. No, she's written some really beautiful music. And it was we had such a fun time playing on it. It was a new experience for me because I've never recorded anything like this remotely before. And we had done one session back when we were in Boston where it was all of us together in a room, and we actually went to a recording studio and we were playing live in time, and I was like, this is great, I love this.
Yeah. But
then shifting that over to doing everything, I'm in California right now, she's in New York. Some of the musicians were any number of different places. I think our violinist was in Chicago at the time. So trying to put all this together from all different parts of the country and getting it to sound as cohesive as possible was definitely something that was new to me, but a lot of fun. And I think I'm really proud of the final product, and I hope she is too. If you get a chance to listen to it, the album is called Just Keep Singing. And it's Maria Wares. It's her first. I think it's her first album that she's done.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I'll link that. I'll link that in the description.
Yeah, definitely.
That's cool. That's cool to know. And I'm really glad to hear that you dove into recording. Because it's just one of those things that I did the last couple of years. I love it. Mixing especially. I love making the drums sound really good and almost like production quality, right?
Yeah.
And like somebody like yourself, obviously it's something that if you did put the time in, you would get good at it, right? That's not a question to me. But you had really no other choices in the last.
Yeah, I think that's kind of funny. It definitely helps. When the alternative is not doing anything, it does gently shift you into like, all right, well, maybe take a couple classes on this. I took 1 or 2 mixing classes, just to sort of feel around how I could get even slightly good at this, or even just better than I am now. Which is it was just really interesting and a lot of fun, and it gave me something to do. And I love playing. So this is just being an extension of creating music was a lot of fun for me.
You basically did the group did what the Postal Service did back in like the early 2000s. That's
right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what people are doing now. That's what musicians are doing now. I love it. I think it's great.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
You can't rely on that performance industry to define your workload or whatever anymore.
Right.
So I'm so glad that like people independently are creating the music and creating an album or an EP or something. I think that's fantastic for listeners. All you really have to do is just start, right? Just like, so if you're a drummer, buy a couple mics, buy an interface. And then if you have GarageBand, if you have an Apple, a Mac or whatever, or a PC, try to see if you can get FL Studio, something, just start recording. And then you'll eventually find that rabbit hole, and and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And then especially, tell me right now, when you got, I guess I imagine you got guitar tracks first, something like that to record to, right? How cool of a feeling was that? Where you're like, okay, I'm about to lay down drums.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, honestly, the first thing I thought was like I was actually quite nervous. Yeah, I was like, because I figured, well, I could send this out and it could, it could not be what they're looking for. It could be, completely wrong, or the sound could be off, or. But once you got into it, playing it was just a ball. I've worked on a couple different projects with different people. Our other guitarist Matt Brown sent me a couple projects that he was working on, and getting just getting a chance to play with real musicians that who created something completely new. It's I don't think there's any better feeling in the world than just working on something brand new.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It definitely taught me a lot, certainly about my playing too, which is it's really interesting when you record something. You have the benefit of really listening intently back to how you've done something.
Yeah.
My tendency always has been to push the tempo, and when you're listening back, and you're trying to find something. Why isn't this sounding exactly as good as it could? And you're listening with that trained ear to figure out what's going wrong. It can be really eye-opening to a lot of aspects of your playing. Are you getting a consistent sound from all of these drums? Are you is one hand weaker than the other? Are you rushing? Are you dragging? It's like putting it all under a microscope, because as you're playing, you're obviously your brain is elsewhere, but when you're listening back to something even that you just did, there's nowhere to hide. You can just sort of see exactly where everything was laid, and it keeps you honest, as well as entertained.
Yeah, man, it definitely keeps you honest. I was gonna say, like, I was listening to something the other day about somebody was talking about the metronome, and it was like the metronome is not your boss. You know, that's not the relationship. And it was almost like, and then I thought about it. Yeah, it's kind of like your best friend that tells you the hard truth
Exactly.
all
Yeah.
the time. You know what I mean? Like in it, and you know, it's not harsh,
Mhm.
right? When you're off that click, man, and you know, it's almost like valuable information to know. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm speeding up on this part constantly. Why is my tendency to do this? Okay,
Mhm.
now I know what to work on.
Right. Well,
That's great, man.
well, and sort of tying that back into theater as well. Our show is almost is 90% clicked. Because we're using a lot of lighting cues and a lot of staging cues. So our conductor's running that click with his foot on Ableton
Mm.
to sort of cue us in and out of different things. But yeah, it's just it keeps you honest, because even if you're doing something 600 times over and over and over again, and it's the exact same thing, you could walk in there and I remember we were sound checking one point in time, and I was playing one section of a song, and I just started playing, and it was entirely too fast, but it felt exactly where it should be. You
Oh,
know,
interesting,
but
right?
then when you pull the click in, you're suddenly like, oh my god, like that's where that should be. And you think you're going crazy, but it's just natural. Because none of us are machines.
Exactly.
But
It's exactly right. Speaking of on the gig, and there's a conductor, and I think we should describe a little bit of that too. So,
sure.
like you're usually in like sort of what they call like a booth or something, right?
Uh-huh.
So, how would you describe that to somebody who doesn't know, like you as the drummer, where you're placed in regards to where all the other musicians are placed, in regards to where that is to the stage?
Sure. So I guess our show wouldn't necessarily be indicative of what a normal show is, but I'll sort of go over what we do. I play in a very large black box, a soundproof box that they tour with us. So that goes with us everywhere. So no matter where they put me
Mm.
in relation, because I'm the only person that's not playing on the stage. I'm playing in different spots no matter where we are, whatever theater we're at. I'm always hidden away somewhere.
Okay.
But the box is always the same. And we have a carpet in there that's like spiked. So everything is always the exact same.
Spiked, by the way. Spiked. Sorry, when you said
go for it.
spiked
Yeah, sorry.
before, no, that's
Yeah.
cool. When you said spiked before, I immediately thought that's dangerous. I thought like medieval, like torture. No, but I'm gathering though. What you mean by spiked is like placed, like tape placed in
Exactly. Yeah.
areas for
tape or a marker of any kind, just so that you're always setting things up in the exact same way.
So the snare drum is exactly in
exactly the same way.
3 pieces of tape. Okay. So go on.
Definitely. Sorry. Yeah. I throw out this terminology. It's like everyone knows what I'm talking about, right? It's like,
cool, man.
but yeah. So that box can go anywhere. Some of the more interesting places I've been. So the regular band is on a platform, so they're seen on the show. They're part of the show's aesthetic. They're up on the platform. That never changes. But for me, I have played 3 stories below, in a warehouse-like environment where all the lights are stored for the theater at the time. I've played on the stage. I've just sort of off slightly.
Yeah.
I've played in. There's one time where I actually played in a neighboring theater. They just ran the cables behind the wall to the theater that connected behind it. We were in San Antonio, and I was in a completely different theater playing. I mean, it's part of the same complex, but it was a different theater, and I was playing while everyone else was behind me on the main stage. But yeah, it's interesting. So I'm always playing remote. As a result, though, I have everything is wired in terms of how I see the conductor. I have 2 different monitors, one above my music stand and then one off to the right underneath the ride cymbal. And then I have
which one is for what?
I don't necessarily need 2 of them. I because we're clicked, I can just sort of check in. at certain spots of the show. But I like to have eyes on him at all times, just in case something is going wrong, or he's got to wave me off, or something's going wrong on stage. So if I am, I've got my head towards the crash cymbal and I'm wailing away on something, and he's trying to catch my eye, I still have some line of sight to him just in case.
I see. That's smart.
A lot of times drummers will have multiple. I mean, percussionists especially. I've seen like 4 or 5 different conductor monitors, so that when they're playing chimes, or when they're up by the timpani, or when they're running around, it's sort of just so they can always have eyes on their conductor, no matter where they are or what they're doing.
Wow.
And then in front of me, I have just a monitor of front of house, which just shows what's happening on the stage, like exactly what the audience would see.
Wow.
Which I don't normally, I don't really need. But because I'm usually in just a completely isolated environment, it's just nice to know what's happening on the stage, and you're feeling like you're part of the show still.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Isolated is the word, because the only reason why I'm asking that, because believe it or not, I didn't really know until a couple years ago. Andres Ferrero?
Yeah.
From
drummer from Hamilton.
Like, I was selling a couple pieces of gear, and I was selling like this little mini Sonar 10-inch snare thing, and on Reverb, and or maybe it was on, I forget, but he saw it somehow, and he hit me up he wanted to buy it. So I honestly happened to be in Midtown that day, and or was going to be. So I brought the drum, and he was so nice. He like invited me into the booth to check out his setup and stuff like that. And the reason why I bring that up is because I did notice a lot of tape everywhere. I did notice a lot of very specific setups. I did notice like there was a monitor, like you said, but it was in a very small, dark, like isolated space. And I remember thinking, like, how many times this guy play a week, you know what I mean? A year, whatever. And like, you're by yourself. Part of playing for me that's fun is the interaction with
definitely.
And you sort of lose that a little bit, I guess. Maybe
you definitely do. It's I was having our bassist that went out with us, Matt Rabano, when we took out, we had a conversation about this just right off the bat. When we were teching the show in Denver, it's just like, I miss feeling the collaboration between all these other people, and the fact that all of them up on the platform are together, and I'm not with them, that's that isolating feeling. It's the missing link that you really desperately want to have. Just in our situation, there's just no other way to do it. But you do miss it, and it's one of those things. Whenever I get the chance to, we sometimes we'll go out and we'll do gigs. I played a gig with one of our one of the leads in the cast, Merrick. When we were in Chicago, and it was just this really fun bar gig that we did of all of his original music. Wow. It was an album release show for him, and it was just so much fun. But one of the things that I loved most about it was that I was on stage with all of these people. I wasn't in a box. I felt like part of it. It's like one of those things that as fun as playing the show is. You do miss that collaboration just in real time, in the real space.
That's that magic, man, right? Like,
definitely,
that magic.
And it's I would say it's really, it's impossible to sort of replicate. It's either there or it's not.
It's one of those. It's one of those things where you know more than anybody too. Just think about that scenario. I got a car full of drums and equipment. I'm driving. Here we go. I just paid $15 to go through the Lincoln Tunnel to go into the city. Oh, this traffic is shit. These taxi drivers are crazy. Oh, watch out for the bikers. Like, all of this stress, right? To go to a gig where you're not really getting paid that much.
Right.
However, you're on stage and you start performing, and you're on stage, whatever. You're playing with people who you like playing with, you like the music, and all of that stuff is answered why you did it, why you went through all of that. Immediately, you're like, okay, this was worth going through all of that nightmarish shit to get here.
Right.
It is immediate, that answer, immediate. until you have to pack up and go home.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, fuck. But yeah, man, I was going to say, like, so right now you're in California, you said?
Yeah. Mhm.
Wow. Now, yeah, I guess it varies from state to state, but have you throughout the summer, were there any opportunities that you saw that people are actually doing some live performance, whether outdoors,
You know, in my community, my parents moved here because it was this used to be my grandparents' house.
Okay.
Um, my mom moved out here to be with my grandfather before he passed away. So it was a couple of years ago. So she's been out here teaching and living here permanently ever since. But the community is it's more of it's like a vacation slash retirement community.
Gotcha.
So it's not a very it's not a very lively community at the moment. There's not a lot going on in terms of live entertainment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you can go. I mean, we're about 2 hours outside of LA, 3 hours outside of San Diego. And I have been to San Diego recently. And I've noticed a couple things happening, very small things happening
Yeah.
outdoors in San Diego. And I've noticed, I've seen tons of things happening. I recently went to New York for a funeral.
Sorry
But
to hear.
oh no, it's all right. Uh, that was the reason I was traveling. Otherwise, I wouldn't be traveling.
Yeah.
But I was in New York recently, and I did notice that there was slowly some things happening. I saw a French horn quartet playing outside of Lincoln Center.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I noticed a couple little things that are happening around, but nothing like it used to be. Obviously,
Yeah, man. I miss it so much, dude.
Mm.
I miss it so much. Live performance and just being an audience member, seeing a live show.
Definitely. It's been very rough, because it is such a big part of my life, and a big part of your life, and I think it's I can only say that it's not going anywhere permanently. It will come back.
It has to.
It will. I mean, it's not. I mean, I believe it. I'm not a fortune teller or a medical expert, but I do believe it's going to come back. It may not come back exactly the same way it was, but I do believe it will come back.
Yeah, man. I think that hunger that I feel you feel for live performance, but also being around it, even as an audience member.
Right.
I actually do think it's our responsibility to remind people, the common folk, like, hey, do you remember what it was like to see a concert? Do you remember what it was like to be in front of a live musicians? Really good,
right.
Something really good. Do you remember that feeling? And I think obviously all we can really do is talk about it. Share YouTube videos of our favorite bands playing live and that crowd interaction. But yeah, that's why I'm doing this show, because it's like, all right, I know so many musicians are like you were killing it, man. You were on fire, and then this halted everything. That's rough. So I wanted to get your story about it too. I want to get your perspective. However, I'm really glad you're like keeping busy. You're diving into recording, man. It's really good to hear that. Really cool.
Definitely. I think that part of what musicians are really good at is making the best of a bad situation, especially in this country. You know what I mean? It's like, you're used to finding new and creative ways to do the thing that you love, because it's not easy. It's never easy. Like you said, you put all of that equipment into the car, you take it, into the city, you face that grind because you love it. Because you can't imagine, not doing that.
Yeah.
But I think that it's, for some of us, it's been a while since you've had to call upon that, that sort of scrappiness and like, all that, stick to itiveness. Like, and then for other people, it's just another day. It was just like, yeah, it's been a struggle for me. I'm used to this. I'm going to carry on.
Yeah.
But I think there is that sort of spirit I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think in almost every musician that says, I'm going to stick this out, and I'm going to see this through because I love what I do.
Dude, I think you're right. And I think one piece of history we should always remember is during the big band swing era, once singers became the feature, people like Frank Sinatra, right? It became less, they didn't need, or they kept saying, oh, we can't afford to have all these musicians with us on this tour. So a bunch of those musicians got fired. Well, some of those musicians were people like Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Charlie Parker. What did they do with their time when they weren't gigging like that? They were playing in Harlem at these clubs, and that's where bebop was born.
Right.
And that changed so much. So
Definitely.
It's an interesting thing to think about. Obviously things are way different now, but there is hope that something will, very exciting and intoxicating musically, something will happen.
I definitely think so. I think that
we can come back to it.
Yeah, we're like these types of conversations. People. Like I was saying in the beginning, our whole mindset was to I got to find work, and
Yeah.
That's amazing, and it's great, and I think there's nothing really wrong with that, but it does occupy so much of our time that now that the whole industry has kind of just come to a pause.
Yeah.
You have all these opportunities to connect and to engage in different aspects of your craft, like recording or like I love being this is like the third podcast I've been a part of, and it's just so much fun. I love talking to different musicians about what's been going on before the pandemic, during the pandemic, how they see things going after the pandemic. It's just been it's but without in a way, without this pandemic sort of halting just the flow of things, a lot of this stuff wouldn't have come to be. We wouldn't have been able to really indulge in this as much. Not to say that it's a good thing, but good things can come out of it. And I think that if you focus on that, it keeps you motivated and passionate, and your stress level down enough that when things do come back, which I believe they will, you're a more enriched and fulfilled person for it.
I think you're right, man. And I'll say for myself, like through the pandemic, like mentally, I'm healthier. Physically, I'm so much healthier. I'm exercising daily. I'm actually like doing, and I enjoy it. I've programmed myself to enjoy it. I'm consistent with it. My eating habits are better. You know what I mean? Like I'm actually more social after the pandemic, So yeah, you're right. You're totally right. Because it was one of those things, man. It's like, I ain't going to sit around during this thing. Like, I'm already sort of sitting around pre-pandemic, and you know what I mean? Like trying to figure something to do. So yeah, it presented opportunities. I know for other people, it's totally not the case, obviously, but clearly for you with your recording, and I was just clicking up on your Instagram page here. You do have some videos of you playing. Now, I was going to ask you, are you going to be uploading some of that, more of that drum video content?
I think so. I did I did fall into a bit of a rut where I was I from playing on tour so much, I have done a little bit of damage to my hands. So I got to be very careful about taking care of them, and every now and then I'll have like a problem with my ulnar nerve in my left arm.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because I have a similar thing.
Yeah. So around the time we were about, I can't remember. It was about half a year into the tour. And I'm hitting these drums just as loud as I possibly can every night. I started noticing there was a bit of tension in both my wrists. It started in my right hand, then sort of migrated to my left hand. And this had never happened to me before, so my natural reaction was to panic and freak out. But after that, I sort of calmed myself down. We were lucky enough to have a physical therapist that we could see on the tour. They had someone come in every week, and we could schedule an appointment with them for about 20 minutes, which is not a lot, but it was something,
Yeah.
And each therapist I saw, we just started working through it. There was a lot of different, a lot of people suggested strengthening the muscles in my back so that I wasn't overworking my forearm muscles. A lot of people were suggesting stretches, using a foam roller to sort of relax and stretch out the muscles in your back. Just any number of things, and just slowly but surely just tackling each thing as it sort of flared up. And but I think that the most important thing for me that I did was reevaluating how I was playing.
Yeah.
And you like anyone, you get into bad habits when you do things over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I did notice I was hitting these drums way too hard. I was gripping the sticks way too tight because I was trying to hit these drums so hard.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that when you're playing in isolation, at a certain point in time, it doesn't matter how hard you're hitting the drums. They're only going to get so loud.
Yeah.
So reevaluating that, my posture was also terrible. Like I was slouching over a lot. I was, just sort of hunched a bit. So, I would take videos of myself and I'd go back and I'd review them. I'd say, okay, so you're slouching here.
Yeah.
I would adjust the chair. I would adjust the height. I would adjust different aspects of the kit and the rig. And I would respike things when I found it was more comfortable. And slowly but surely, as I was working through that, I was able to diagnose why certain things were happening in my body and why, what I could do to prevent them. But recently, I realized that I spend a lot of time leaning on my shoulder.
Yeah.
On my elbow.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, you're just compressing that nerve in your, I think it's cubital canal, I think is what it's called. I'm not entirely sure. But I was noticing I was just feeling a little bit of coldness in the last two of my fingers.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a very strange thing to be dealing with.
Yeah.
So when I would talk to some of the therapists that I've met on the road, it was just sort of very much, you can do some nerve glides, but you got to be very careful that you're not, leaning on that nerve because you're just going to agitate it over and over again.
Yeah. I'm so happy to hear that somebody else, that was my thought of why I was having the same pain you had and tingly this in that on that pinky side, right?
Yep. Like, right up and down. Mm-hmm.
I'm not happy that it happened to you. I guess what I'm like, that was my theory that I was doing a lot of leaning too on the left side. And and I thought like, I think this is because it was like a default position that I would end up. Mm-hmm. I never decided to be there. I would come to, why am I leaning? I don't need to lean like this. I was just hanging out, like, yeah, man. Have you been able to now you made a self-diagnosis as far as your technique and stuff. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed a difference?
I noticed that as long as I'm, I think for me, I was not, so I guess playing every night had its benefits as well as its drawbacks. Mm-hmm. And when I came off the road, I was very tired and I just said, you know what, I'm just going to take a break. I'm not going to jump right into playing every day again. And I think a lot of the strength and, attention to posture and, attention to, leaning on your elbow and things like that, all of those bad habits just sort of came flooding back because I wasn't playing every night. There wasn't a giant spotlight saying, hey, you got to take care of yourself because otherwise you're not going to be able to play. So that when I did go back to playing, all of those different problems just came right back. I'm like, oh, you need to take care of yourself. Otherwise, these are going to resurface. So
Currently, are you still somewhat feeling like, are there moments of, okay, if I play it for a little bit too long, or if I play specific types of parts that I feel a bit of pain, is that still happen?
less and less as I learn more and more. I think that as I'm a bit of a hypochondriac, so my natural reaction is to think that it's something irreparably damaging, and I get, my mom was always picking on me for that, but
Yeah.
I think that the more you learn about your body, the better off you're going to be in terms of trying to figure out um, what you're doing to cause the problem versus what you're doing to help the problem as well. I have a there's just a whole litany of different things that I've tried since being on the road, all of which have seemed to somewhat help. Um, you know, Depending on what symptom I'm trying to attack. It could be a strained muscle, it
Mm.
could be a nerve issue, it could be a posture issue, it could be something that's up with your neck.
Yeah.
And each therapist I've seen, each incidence where I've had some type um, of abnormality in terms of my body, has taught me something, and I
Yeah.
just keep using that information over and over again. I'm like, all right, well, it wasn't this, maybe it was this, or if this isn't working, it's got to be this. I use things like a drummer friend of mine, Tom, recommended this thing called Powerball, which is
Oh, I know
I
that.
think
I know that
yeah,
thing.
like a therapist in Ireland, I think, came up with it. But it
Yeah.
sort of treats um, symptoms of like tennis elbow and golfer's elbow, which at one point we thought I had, because I was throwing my arms so much.
Yep.
I had strained the muscles in my forearm. But it's like you try, and there was times where I was trying to use the Powerball on my left arm, and it was making things worse. So I think that the more you experiment and the more you try and tackle things, the more you learn about your body and what's causing the problem and what's helping. Um,
Man, so I have two. Can I recommend two things to you that helped me?
yeah, sure.
One was a book by this guy, John E. Sarno, MD. It's called The Mind Body Prescription.
Okay.
The idea was this, and I like you use the word hypochondriac, which is specifically what he talks about, which is like the response to pain. So you would feel pain, right? Get anxious,
Mm.
right? And like the brain just goes, what? Anxiety? Danger? You're drumming?
Mm.
Drumming is danger.
Yeah.
And then now your brain pairs drumming with that pain. And sometimes what happens is it's like this weird animal, like, hey, you're on those drums. We're going to remind you of the pain so that you stay away from this.
Right.
And sometimes it's like mental, like it's like psychological sometimes. It
Right.
doesn't mean that the pain's not there, but it might be inflated because of that anxiety of your thoughts of like, oh my God, if I can't, for you, it must have been like, I play 600 and something shows a year. If I can't get through a week of this, then I got to quit or something. Then what the fuck am I going to do? Like that probably made you spin. You know what I mean?
Definitely. It was chaotic. When it first started happening, I was like, oh no, now what?
Yeah, man. In the book, he just talks about like how to calm that. That's part of your nervous system is your thoughts, how they drive, right? So yeah, how to calm all that down. And then my other recommendation would be: are you familiar with I've talked about him so much on this with other drummers, but are you familiar with Dave Elich, the drummer?
Dave Elich. Yes. I know who he is.
So okay. And I got to tell you, man, this is a game changer.
Mhm.
Like I went and took a lesson with him like 2 years ago. I was in LA for a day.
Oh, nice.
And I set it up and it was like a 2 hour something lesson. And dude, he just broke everything apart. He really just, from the way I was sitting to how I was using my legs to play the bass drum and the hi-hat to what my legs were doing, even as detailed as like, what is my foot doing? What is my leg doing right after impact of the bass drum? Then as far as stick technique, I got to tell you, man, the stick technique thing, is a game changer because it makes so much sense and takes so little effort to get the best sounds and to also minimize tension. And it changed everything. And
Nice.
I noticed it because I was recording at the time too, like still, making my own recordings and stuff like that. And I noticed that when you're spending time mixing what you recorded and you're soloing that snare drum track, and trying to EQ it and compress it, whatever. I can't tell you the sweetness of the sound that I was trying. It was like, wow, that sounds so much better. And it was because of this grip. And a lot of it just has to do with where you're holding it, what the stick is doing after impact, which is has the same benefit to how all of that shock, what happens with all that vibration and shock, allowing the stick to vibrate like that, but not have this area here in your wrist and your fingers absorb that shock, which when you were saying like gripping real hard and hitting real hard, you were absorbing your body was absorbing all of that shock, which
definitely
did some damage. And I'm only saying that because I did the same shit on like wedding gigs and stuff like that. Like it's so loud on stage, I can't hear myself. So I'm just going to like tough it out and just beat the shit out of these drums, and wound up being like a really bad decision. So anyway, this took care of all that stuff. Like it actually made everything a lot better. So I'll send you a link to him. You can actually
absolutely
lessons too. Like you could take a lesson with him, but he also has and I actually bought it. You can pay for. He has like a lesson series, and he goes through all this shit. I mean, I highly recommend, man. I highly recommend. I think you would dig it.
Definitely.
Yeah, man. So, but I'm glad that you, with your own diagnosis and practice, have been able to undo some of these bad habits. For drummers listening, or any musician listening, it's a big deal. Like this shit can. It never is convenient when you find out about it.
Right.
You usually don't know what to do about it right away. And it drives you nuts. It makes it uncomfortable to play. That's the worst feeling, is when I am in pain doing something I love to do. That's the worst feeling.
Well, it's funny. One of the things that really definitely helped about, dealing with this was the sense of community. It's like, this is something that so many people deal with. People that are absolute masters of the instrument, have at some point in their career had to reevaluate how they play and reevaluate what they're doing because they don't want to hurt themselves. And I can't tell you how much of a comfort that is, knowing that you're not alone in terms of this. It's almost not a matter of if you will experience something like that, but if you're playing long enough, when you will experience something like that, and then what you need to do at that point in time.
Yeah, man. Even people like Thomas Lang, like is a guy who I researched this stuff, drummers and carpal tunnel syndrome, and yeah, man, he had like bandages and stitches on where his carpal tunnel is on his wrist because he got the surgery. And I think it was like his second time getting it, which is crazy. That somebody, oh man, the idea of sticking metal in there and making a cut into where these nerves are, there's like a percentage of chance that you'll like lose ability if they mess up. And I'm thinking like, I'm out cold. There's nothing I could do about that. I'm literally handing my my career away, possibly, like power to him. And it worked out for him. But it just goes to show even a guy like that who can play so fast and has such great technique is still affected by this stuff. So
definitely,
yeah, man. It's crazy. It's crazy, dude. It's a weird thing. It was almost like, okay, well, even this could take down the giant.
Exactly.
So but glad to hear it's better for you, man.
Thanks, man. It's I always think of it as a work in progress. There's always going to be, and everybody's different. Every person's technique is different. Every person's musical journey is different. So there's going to be differences in terms of how people are responding to certain treatments and therapies and things like that. And then but I think that the more you experience these types of things, the better you are at handling it. The better you are at finding out early what's going on, and the better you are at preventing things in the future from happening. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's the type of thing that I didn't necessarily, it wasn't forward on my mind until I was playing over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Especially the same thing over and over and over and over again,
Was that a
Um,
benefit that you were at least doing the same thing consistently from night to night?
Definitely. I think in terms of trying to figure out what exactly I was doing wrong
Yeah.
was helpful because, when you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, you're starting from a very level playing field. It's like, okay, I'm not thinking about, well, maybe I'm only doing it in this particular song that I only play with this particular set, with this particular band, with this particular group, at this particular place, on this particular kit.
Yeah.
When your environment is controlled like that, where you're playing on the exact same kit to a T, where everything is just sort of, perfectly aligned, you're in a much better position to say, okay, well, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. Oh, wait a minute, that's weird. That's a little bit odd. Let me try fixing the posture. Let me try adjusting the chair. Am I sitting too high? Am I sitting too low? Am I reaching for things? Is my back, hunched? It's like that type of stuff. When you're in a controlled environment, it is a lot easier, and it's a lot, conversely, it's a lot harder when you're constantly moving from different environments and shows and genres and things like that. It's trickier, not impossible, but definitely trickier. So yeah, I definitely think that the gig did sort of, help in terms of trying to isolate, okay, here's where I think some of your problems are.
That's
But
really good considering you're doing like, I don't know, 100 of them a month or whatever. That's good to hear. Cause like that would stress me out. Like, oh shit, I got how many more of these to do? You know what I mean? So, wow, man, that's good to hear though. That's good to hear. So for listeners, I want you to please go out and follow Ryan McCausland on Instagram. Ryan McCausland Drums is his Instagram name. And yeah, man, he's a great dude, and he's a really great percussionist and drummer. And check out now. This was Maria
Wearies, yeah.
Maria Wearies,
yeah,
or Wearies.
Wearies. Here, I want to make sure that I am spelling her name 100% right. So give me 1 second.
Cool. Oh, speaking of, we mentioned Carter, and I'm on your page, and you have a picture of Carter.
Yeah, there was someone had tagged. I'm so bad at following through on these things. There was one of my good friends tagged me in the group where it was like, list drummers who were your influence.
Oh, I got tagged. Yeah.
I did not follow through, and I if you're listening, Q, I'm really sorry. I meant to follow through on that. I'm really sorry. The two drummers that I found that I really gel with the most. One would be Carter Beauford, who was the first drummer that I saw and said, I want to play like that. The second being David Garibaldi from Tower Power, was just funk and that style of music is just, I am enamored with. I always have been. I'm sure I always will be. So
yeah, I mean, could you get any more contrasting facial expressions when playing drums? Like David Garibaldi, very serious, and Carter's just all smiles. He's the happiest drummer alive.
Definitely.
I love that guy for that.
Although I will say this, it was a really, really cool thing that happened when I was in Cleveland, and we were playing the show, and Cleveland, I don't know if you're familiar with they have a whole theater um, complex. It's sort of, there's I can't remember the names of them at this time, but like
Cool.
they're like right next door to each other.
Gotcha.
Almost like a Broadway, theater in New York. But at the time we were there, we were playing at the far end of the street, and then next door to us was I think the bigger theater, and they having the Cleveland Jazz Festival there.
Oh,
So there
wow.
was just music everywhere at this time, and it was, I thought, the coolest thing. So we were there for about 3 weeks, and on the second week, so the second week or the third week that we were there, Tower Power was headlining
Oh, wow.
the festival, and I thought, it'd be really, really cool if I could meet Dave Garibaldi.
Yeah.
I went to a clinic of his when I was really young with my first drum set teacher, and I met him once. He would not at all remember that, but I did, and I was like, I want to meet him again.
Yeah.
But I have no way of reaching out to him. I have no way of figuring out, how to get in touch with him, except that he has a Facebook fan page. So I figured, oh, what the hell, So I reached out on his Facebook group, and I said, hey, I know you're in town for the jazz festival. I'm a huge fan. I would love to say hi. We're playing a show in the neighboring theater next door. And I never expected to hear back from him. But the day that he came into town, he was only in town for 2 days. The day that he came into town, he wrote back. He's like, yeah, sure. Let's meet up. I'll be outside the stage door at this time. And
Wow.
then he sent me his phone number, and we met up right outside the stage door right before he came on. He's like, well, I have to go in and sound check. Do you want to come and watch the sound check? So I think there's some video on my Instagram where I'm sitting behind Dave Garibaldi, and I'm taking a video of them sound checking. And, apart from the fact that he is just a legendary drummer, he is one of the nicest guys I've ever met. And for him to take that time for someone that, really, I could offer him nothing, it's just like, hey, you're one of my favorite drummers. I'd love to meet you. And then, I think later that night he came in after he was done the set, and walked around the side and he was looking for the drums on the stage. He's like, I can't find you. And it's like, well, that's because I'm not on the stage. I'm actually below the stage. And I took a picture of the kit, and he thought that was the coolest thing. He's like, that's so cool that you're playing, in a different spot, but still part of the show. And it was cool to like have that sort of connection with, this is Dave Garibaldi. It's like,
Yeah, man. For people listening, like that, this guy, David Garibaldi, when a drummer hears that name, that's like, he's a legend.
He's a legend. This is,
he changed a little bit,
absolutely,
as far as like the patterns that you can play on like a more pop oriented music, but it's funk music.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, people try to imitate how he plays and try to learn his parts to this day still. So
definitely,
that is so cool of him to like meet up with you. And oh man, thank you for sharing that.
Definitely. I think, and the moral of that story would be, if you ever find yourself in a situation where that a drummer is coming to town that you love, I mean, what do you got to lose? See if there's a way that you can meet up with them, because you never know. It's just for him to take his, for him to offer up his time like that was generous. But then for him to even, take an interest in what I do was just icing on the cake. It's like, so yeah, like definitely if that there's someone who's coming to town, I got a chance to meet another drummer that I really love, Cliff Almond.
I know that guy. Yeah,
Cliff actually is now playing Sean's old show, Book of Mormon. He's the drummer on that show now for he was when they were playing. But he took over the book when Sean went to Frozen, and I got to watch him play a Broadway show, which is a very different environment to watch Cliff Almond play a Broadway show versus watching him play with like Michelle Camillo,
the Blue Note.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's but again, just a really nice guy. And who, it was really cool to have him take some of his time and let me watch him and chat with me after the show. And it's what do you got to lose? Sometimes you'll swing and miss. Like there's a couple times where I've reached out to guys and I have never heard back. But
Yeah.
the few that do get back to you, it makes it worth it.
That's so cool, man. That's exciting. Connecting with somebody who's, I don't know if people understand. Tell me if you agree with this. I don't give a shit about famous people.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, celebrities over there. I don't give a shit. I don't care. Right. But
mm-hmm.
if you have contributed something to something I love, which is music and live performance, and it's that contribution is a major thing, like a David Garibaldi, like a Carter Beauford, right? Somebody that comes to mind, man, would be like, God, if I get to meet Steve Gadd, for instance,
Yeah.
Like that's somebody who I would kind of go like, oh my God, I want to meet them, but I don't want to take a picture with them. I don't care about that. I'm not, this is for me. This is not to show anybody. I would love to just talk to the guy.
Definitely.
A couple minutes, right? Like, same with like, I'm trying to think of another like, obvious choice of a drummer, but I mean like, oh, fuck drummers. Paul McCartney. How cool would that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like
it doesn't even have to be someone who's a drummer. It could be just a musician that's inspired you. Definitely. Yeah. It's like there's no better feeling in the world really than connecting with musicians who've inspired you. And then something that I've really, really, really enjoyed on the tour is getting to be that inspiration for other people. We do have a lot of young people that more and more and more young people are interested in playing in orchestras in theater, and we have a very young audience that comes to see the show, and there are a bunch of kids that I reach out to me and other members of the band, and hey, I want to do this. I want to play Broadway shows. How did you do it? How who should I study with? Where should I go to school? Those kinds of things. And my favorite experience of being on tour was getting to connect with those people, because I do see a lot of myself in those people, which with the people who helped me get to where I am, like Sean and like his husband Ben Cohn, who's our music director for the Broadway show in New York.
Yeah.
Because they took the time to share what they love with me, before I even was able to get into high school shows.
Yeah.
That is something that's really special. And now that I get to sort of on a very small level play that role to someone else across the country is awesome.
Yeah, man. I was gonna say it's almost like if you were to take that into an idea, the idea is that these people we look up to, they should, when a David Garibaldi kind of meets up with you, and he just shows you he's human.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, hey, here's me as a human. Hey, fellow human. That
Mm-hmm.
actually is like, because we think of them on such a high level, we don't know who they are, but when they show themselves as human to you, you're sort of doing a similar thing to these young people, like, hey, I'm human. Like, just like
Exactly.
you, I'm human, you know what I mean? And I see where you're at, and I know I've been there, and I validate where you're at, and if I can help you, I will. That's really cool to hear, dude. Really cool. On that note, such a positive note, dude. I mean, thank you for sharing all that. On that note, listeners, Ryan McCausland Drums on Instagram. Go follow him right now. Maria
Wearies. Here I have the correct spelling of her name. Right here. Maria, Maria Wearies, Wirries.
All right. And the new album?
New album is called Just Keep Singing. Yeah, please take a listen to it. There's some really awesome music. She's amazing.
Ryan recorded the drums.
Yes, I recorded a couple of the tracks, and and a lot of really amazing musicians recorded as well. It's a lot of them I've been lucky enough to tour with. Maria's boyfriend Matt is he mixed the whole thing. He plays guitar on all the tracks. It's a really awesome album. I hope you guys can check it out.
Awesome. Ryan, thank you so much for being on.
Hey, thank you so much, Anthony. It's been so great to reconnect and chat, and this has been awesome.
Yeah, man, definitely, without a doubt. We gotta grab a beer when that's possible soon.
Absolutely. Hopefully sooner than later, but definitely when it's safe.
Definitely, man, definitely. All right, everybody. But dumb biz to you. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, man.